Transmedia, just a tea.
Deputy Director of Europe Office, Pablo López Alonso, thank you for being here. Could you present yourself, please?
Well, as you said, I'm Pablo López. I'm originally from Spain, and I've been working here at Glasgow Caledonian University for a bit over 4 years now. And mainly that's I'm married. I have one kid, another one on the way, and we live here in Glasgow.
You are an expert in European projects, in internationalization, research funding. Do you like cinema as well?
I don't recall the last time I've been to a cinema as such.
But here in Glasgow you have a really great...
But yes, that's correct. It's not that I don't like movies, it's just I don't like... the cinema environment is not something I like, so I prefer to watch movies at home or on my laptop, but not going to the cinema with popcorn and mobiles ringing and people talking. Not something that I like.
It's not the perfect atmosphere to enjoy.
Yeah. So movies. To be honest, I don't remember the last time I've been to a cinema.
And a movie that you remember at home?
You mean in terms of my favorite movie, or it could be a latest movie that I've seen that I enjoy?
An inspiring one, a movie that have inspired you for your research or your life.
Well, in terms of inspiring, to be honest, I don't recall any. I mean, I enjoy watching movies, but I don't recall one movie that you watch it and you say, "Well, this changed to me in any way," or added.
Some researchers say us that they have their ideas watching a movie because there is when they disconnect of the actual problems, and then after that it's
for me it's when I'm having a shower.
Having a shower, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably the time when you let your mind wander, and suddenly you say, "Oh shit, that thing. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it makes sense." So when you do that connection, for me, the something that happens quite frequently when having a shower.
So after the shower, we are properly, and shall we start? What is a project? A project.
Something that changes something.
You have an initial state, and you need to go to another one.
Yeah.
And the project is the thing that is in the middle? That would be between the first stage and the second one that you...
What do you mean by that? I didn't get the question right in terms of...
A project, it's because...
In general?
Yeah,
the type of projects that we work in?
No. In general, we are going to focus on soon in the project that you are working.
Okay. A project is a process of changing something. So going from A to B. So how you do that, basically.
So project management is?
Management of change.
The project manager role, that is your actual role.
Make sure the things go as they should. So that's mainly what we do. We have two functions here at the office. One is supporting academics when they want to apply for anything that is related to EU funding, because sometimes it's a very wide range of potential projects. So you need to identify what that academic wants or what is the idea that they have. So guide them to the right direction in terms of what are the funding opportunities available, and then if some of those projects get funded. So we support the academic to ensure that they get the adequate support to successfully complete that project proposal. And the other thing is we also participate in projects that we as an office participate in. So there are projects, for example, we have one with Iran, on internationalization of their universities. So that on that one we act as a subject matter experts. So we're the ones supporting them or supporting the project on that. So we have a dual role, both on the technical part and on the administrative part.
It's not an easy task because the expertise of an academic is not the management normally.
Yeah, usually they're quite bad at management. and I think that, I mean, working here, the big difference is that compared to Spain, and on the case of Spanish universities, in a Spanish university you have the director of internationalization is usually an academic that, because of political connections, ends up in an administrative role. Here in the UK, in general, is more professionalized. So the role of a director of international is advertised and is not a requirement to be an academic or an academic at that university to get that role. So you get people that have experience and that are focused on that activity, and it also gives sustainability, because that person could be working at the university for a few years, not like in Spain that you're 4 years, then depending if the rector is re-elected or not, you may change or not. So that gives sustainability to the strategic ideas or the strategic path of the university.
And as well, you face international projects maybe twice per week, one per month, and an academic face that possibility once per year maximum. So
they should theoretically be more exposed to international activities when they go to conferences or events outside of the university. But that's true that sometimes they just are focused on their research activity and they don't consider the implications of all the administrative work that goes behind the project. So that's where we kind of try to police what they do. So remember to keep the boarding passes and do this and do that and chase them for the different deadlines. So
we already know what is a project, what is that kind of project in the university. But in European projects is your task right now. You need to manage with different cultures because it's not the same an Scottish than an Italian, and they need to work together. And you as a consultancy staff, what do you advise to your colleagues in order to form the groups? What is important in that?
The first suggestion that I always make if an academic comes along and they say I don't have a partner for a project or I'm looking for partners, I try to I always give the example of going into a pub on a night out.
Yeah.
So a project, you're going to bed with somebody for 3 years. So you're going to have a close relationship for 3 years. So are you going to get somebody that you already know, or are you going to go to a pub and pick up the first person that shows up and go to bed with that person? You don't know what the outcome is going to be. It might be good, but it might be also bad. So in that sense, try to get somebody that you know, or somebody who knows somebody that you know, so that there is some type of a personal relationship there. In terms of the culture, it's not that much the issue of the cultural differences. It's more the differences of people. So a lazy person is going to be a lazy person in any culture, a hardworking one. So in that sense, it's not the culture is not the main issue in that sense, although it's something that you must be aware of, especially when you have project meetings in places outside of Europe, where you could have bigger cultural differences depending which country you go. We have projects in Southeast Asia, Middle East, North Africa, Latin America. So in that sense, you have to be aware of cultural differences, be respectful. But in terms of from the academic point of view, it's just make sure that you get somebody that you may have some type of link with. So you can, it will make things easier in terms of working with those people.
And what about you are speaking about the pubs? What about the pubs in Glasgow? What is the life here?
To be honest, I don't know. The reason is I don't drink, I don't smoke, and we have a 2-year-old baby, so we don't go out at night.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I know. It's I wouldn't be able to recommend a pub in Glasgow.
But in any case, I'm going to show you an image. Could you describe this image to the people who listen to us?
It's 4 maps of a metro in different cities in London, Paris, New York, and Glasgow.
And the difference, maybe?
The difference is that Glasgow is the simplest one of them, and the reason is that it hasn't been expanded since it was created. It was the 3rd subway that was created in the world after Moscow and New York, I think it was.
Yeah, 100 more than 120 years old, I think.
Did you go on the?
Yeah.
It's really very nice because it's very small, so a tall person needs to.
And it is related with the Scottish character to do the things in the simplest way, in an easy way, always. Because, for example, the name of the streets, High Street, Middle Street, or something.
You have a High Street in nearly every. You have either High Street or Main Street in nearly every town in the UK and probably in the United States also.
It's something British to try to.
Something very common.
Do you know that in Spain we fight to put the names to the streets? Mm-hmm. And here, mainly there are of course names of important people, but a lot of the streets have common names without worrying about that kind of questions.
To be honest, I'm not aware of the naming process or the conflicts that may bring. I'm sure that there is when you have newer streets, there's always some type of debate on that. So I think that probably the biggest difference, and I'll give you a specific example on a street naming. It's in Spain. It's usually the corporation, the city council, that gets together and decides. I live in Paisley. There's 15 kilometers away from Glasgow, and they are building a new residential area where the old football stadium was. So what they did is they got a list of the main names of the people that were football players at some stage, and what they did is they put that for people to vote. Mm-hmm. Who do you want to name the streets after?
Why not?
So they got a short list, and they named the streets after those ones that were shortlisted. So you get people involved. So that's something good, I think.
I'm trying to try to enjoy with you Glasgow. Maybe not in the pubs, but maybe with that image. Could you describe that picture in the laptop?
That's it looks like a Iberico ham or shoulder. I don't know if it's a paletilla or a jamón. And it's very appetizing.
A plate and a knife.
And a knife, yes. Ham holder, plate, knife, and the shoulder, yes.
And do you miss that, or is possible to have that kind of
the good thing is that at the moment, because we still are in the single market and the customs union, you can order that from Spain and get that shipped here in 3 days or so. So if you want a ham in your home, just order it, get it in 3 days, and that's it. So it's not a problem in that sense. Even though I met a guy he lives in Israel. He's Spanish. He married an Israeli girl, and they're living there. And he does miss ham because in Israel, of course, they don't have pork products.
Well.
So he really misses the ham.
And I think that you are also well recognized for your ability to cut because it's not an easy task.
I do that here at the university, so sometimes we have events and we get a ham, and I do that, and that attracts more people to the workshops. Yeah, people enjoy it, and it's something that you never know where life is going to take you. So that was something that I did professionally for a few years, carving ham for weddings, events.
Jamonadas.com.
Yeah, it was that for a while. Yeah.
You have you are right now encouraging people to entrepreneur, to academic, but you have been an entrepreneur.
A failed entrepreneur, yes.
A failed entrepreneur.
Well, I don't have the business anymore.
The essence of an entrepreneur is to fail, no?
Yeah, well, yeah, a very shameful essence, yes, but that's I've been through that experience. I think it also needs to be linked with the character of the person, and well, it was a very interesting experience for a while, and I learned a lot out of that, and one of the skills I still retain is carving a ham. So it's something that I enjoy doing every now and then. It's not something I would enjoy doing every day now, but...
Why is important to introduce entrepreneurship in higher education?
I think that it is important in the sense that it's good to give a wide overview of what the possibilities are for the students, because they may not be aware of what the options are. So traditionally, for example, in Spain, we have this idea of funcionarios, of the civil servants, so you work for somebody else. It's good for them, at least, so they know that they have the tools and they have the potential or where to find the information if they want to develop an idea that they have. So that's an option. I think that it's important for them to have that choice. In terms of being the best choice, I think that it depends on the person, on the context, on the individual needs.
Unless to have the option.
At least you have the option. I think that entrepreneurship needs also to be a bit more, because it's now embedded in many curricula in different universities. I think that it needs to develop in terms of not only giving the positives, but also showing the negatives. Because when you go to any entrepreneurship course, you have examples of Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all these people. But you also need to show failure and the consequences of failure. So people don't get with wrong ideas in their heads of they are going to become billionaires in 3 years' time or anything. You need to be a bit more realistic. And I think that that's still the missing part on some of those curricula.
Maybe if we introduce before in the primary school, it could be easier, that kind of skills. For example, we spoke with Alejandro Pizzitelli. He's an expert in creativity, in labs, and for creativity he thinks that it's really important to connect dots, of course, but to connect dots, he thinks that it's key to have two expertise, your academical and a different one. And for example, he has tested that if you show and if you allow a child, she's 6 years old, to he or she is 15, to, for example, explore the stars, the dinosaurs, whatever, and this guy has a guidance by a teacher or whatever. Then when he or she finishes his education, has two expertises, and it's easier for them to connect dots because you have this diversity inside your curriculum. But since you are a child, what's your opinion about that?
I'm not a researcher, so I'm not going to argue against any
Don't
research.
insult me. I'm not.
No, but I'm not going to argue against any research. My opinion is that it is good.
No, but you deal with them.
It's good for children to have access to different topics, different things. They need to be creative. But I think that is very different from being entrepreneurial or to have entrepreneurship skills. We're talking about soft skills and curiosity and how to satisfy that curiosity. So it's good that the children have the potential of developing that and doing that. I think that entrepreneurship is more of the technical implementation of your idea. So in that sense, I wouldn't say that it's best to include entrepreneurship as a concept since they are children, because that I think that just pushes into a commercial mindset.
But not to introduce as a concept, as a maybe as a reality, because if they decide to choose some field and to explore it, they are an entrepreneur. Some kind of freedom, not a strict.
Yes, and they have curiosity and they have the tools to satisfy that curiosity. A different thing is that because of that curiosity, you decide to do that your business or your way of making a living. So I think that those are different type of. I mean, you could be making a living through other means, but still be curious and still be doing other things outside of that.
And finally, why not to connect both? Like in your case, jamón with research.
The thing is that I don't do research on jamón, and jamón doesn't influence research. It just drives people to.
You use that in order to attract more people to the.
Yes, so it is a tool. It's not. It's not another essential aspect of that training.
Transmedia, just a T. Esteban Galán.
We are enjoying a lot, but we are finishing this conversation with Pablo López Alonso. He's expert in European projects, internationalization, research funding. Do you remember people who have been important in your career?
You mean people that I worked with, or
maybe both? Do you have worked with or read or watch on TV sometimes that inspired you?
Well, I think that everybody that you work with is always a learning opportunity. Especially when some of those people do the wrong things. Sometimes you learn more working somewhere that does things really bad, and you learn sometimes much more than people doing good things. So in terms of the influence, I think that everybody that I've met, especially within the work environment, has influenced in a positive way, both if they behaved good or bad. So both if at that time I perceived the influence as bad, I think that has always been positive. In terms of well-known people or ideas, or I think that Noam Chomsky has been in two aspects, because I studied linguistics, and from the linguistic aspect is what the hell is this guy talking about? But then you have the political aspect, and he's a very well structured, nearly philosophical, but also economic, socio-political argument. So that is very interesting. And in terms of reading, I'm not a bookworm. So I read, but it's not that I read a lot. I'm more into non-fiction than fiction. But the book that I read, and I think that it was very, very interesting, even though I'm not a religious person, but I read the Bible. I think it was an eye-opener, especially when you read that, and the Bible is nearly everywhere. You hear people quoting the Bible in different places, and when you read it, you go, so this is what they meant when they usually quote this, but it means something completely different. And there are plenty of examples of that. So I found that very interesting, especially when later in life people start quoting the Bible, or they say, oh, but the Bible says this. No, it does not. It says this other thing, but you interpret whatever you want. So in that sense, I think it has been an interesting book.
It's an interesting and a co-creative book as well, is not?
Well, that's a different debate. The co-creation of the Bible is very different.
For another day?
Maybe.
I'm going to show you a video. There is no sound. Do you identify the place?
I think there's New York.
It's New York. It's Times Square. And I'm going to show the same video, but right now with sound. Do you identify the song?
Well, I don't identify the band, the pipe band, but of course the song is Asturias.
Asturias, Patria Querida.
Patria Querida, de Asturias Hymn.
And just behind McDonald's in Times Square.
But there's a McDonald's in Oviedo, so there's...
Yeah. And this has a special meaning for you? This.
You mean the pipes, the song?
All that, the song maybe.
Of course, I grew up in Asturias, so it's something that, I mean, it's
where is
within
Asturias?
you.
Where is?
It's northwest of Spain. I always have to explain that it's far away from where people usually go on holidays from here, from the UK.
But not typical Spain, because it's not so different than Scotland, Asturias. The landscapes.
It's similar in that sense, in terms of being green, having mountains, but it's different in terms of the weather. Here, I think it rains a bit much more. It's wetter in that sense, but yeah, in general, it's quite similar, and probably that's part of why we settle in so well in Scotland.
And the decision to go abroad. It's not easy, never, not.
I lived in Ireland for a few years before going back to Spain, and the reason to go out again, I worked in a university. My wife was also an academic in the same university, and that's when the Spanish government decided not to allow hiring civil servants, so that created an impact, because the situation at that stage was a precarious employment situation. There was no guarantee whatsoever, and you get to an age that you cannot just sit and wait. And you're getting to an age, I mean, you're not getting any younger, so you need to find ways of settling yourself and finding a way. So we made the conscious decision. Okay, let's see where we can go, where we can both have a job and a decent, well paid or stable job. So that's how we ended up here. So I'm working here at GCU. My wife is working also. She's a academic English lecturer. So in that sense, it has worked out well for both of us, except for Brexit, depending where that goes. But so far, it has been a positive move. Of course, nobody wants to go away from their family and from their home. But you have to choose. I mean, do you stay there and get a few cows and and live off the land, or do you try to find something different that works for you?
Brexit is like a cloud that all Europe have upon our heads, and it's going finally to rain.
Well,
not.
I don't think it is a cloud on Europe's head. I think there's a cloud on UK's head. I think
it has a huge impact.
it has impact, but I think, look, Europe is 500 million people. The UK is 60 million people. So when they say, oh, it's more important for Europe because the commercial and the impact, the difference is that for Europe, is going to, if the UK lives with no deal, it will be like chopping a finger off. From a UK perspective, it's chopping either an arm and a leg off. So it's going to be damage for both sides, but who's going to suffer the most damage?
Yeah.
So if you're saying that in terms of commercial activity, you're going to lose 60 billion. It's not the same 60 billion divided by 440 million people than 60 billion divided by 60 million people. So that, I think that is a big difference. I think that the UK still has that imperial approach of doing things, and they always have to be right, and they are the ones making the decisions. When, I mean, it's not an empire anymore. So my biggest hope is that if things go wrong, in terms of having a massive impact on the UK, that Scotland will become independent. And if we were in England, we'll probably be gone by now to another country. Because I know people living in England, and the xenophobic atmosphere for European nationals in some places is not bearable. I mean, it's not something I would like to live.
Brexit is related with populism?
I think it's related to populism. I think it's related to xenophobic attitudes. From my perspective, it's the hooligans in football in the 80s, in British football in the 80s, moving into politics. So it's racism because...
Maybe it's a good example because you remember that, and British teams were, I think, for some years without competing in Europe, and they come back, and right now Premier League is the strongest maybe league in Europe. Maybe we need something like that right now to a temporary Brexit, take into account the difficulties of that, and then to come back again. I don't know.
It's. I mean, I think that they need to go through a cathartic process of realizing that they are not what they used to be, because most of the Brexit voters, the Leave voters, they had this image of England and being back to Great Britain and all that. So I think there's a very misleading perception of reality. I think that they may need to go through a cathartic process of saying, look, you're on your own, and the impact that it's going to create. The problem with that is you have to think that that will impact most people that have less. Yeah. Rich people are still rich people. They're not going to notice anything. And also that process of going out, coming back in, you could be talking at least 10 years. And from a political perspective, it doesn't sound like much, but 10 years is a lot of time for people.
Lives of a lot of people, the projects, the family,
it's not project. I mean, it's your everyday life.
No, your life project.
And how you organize things and how you plan things. That is a very long time. And even though I think it will be good for them to go through that process, I don't think they will be good for individual people.
A lot of people maybe are going to suffer unemployment, instability.
And now when you look back in history books and you say, oh, this war lasted for 20 years, and you think, oh, that was a relatively small amount of time from a historic perspective. Yeah. But if you're living that, I mean, 20 years suffering a war or 20 years suffering uncertainty, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot for individual people.
So we hope we get finally a solution It has been a pleasure listening to the Asturias Patria Querida. We can finish this.
Thank you.
Un placer.
Igualmente.
Transmedia, just a tea.